Hey everyone, it's Theo from Spectrum Gardening. So if you've been following our videos to date, you've been able to see what our backyard was when we first moved here and what we've had to do to it just to get it to the state where it is now. It's taken us a lot longer to get here than I thought we would, for a few different reasons. One, we had some issues with the house that need to be addressed before we could do anything else. Two, I've been having some heart issues. So not only has it been slowing me down considerably, but however, I've also been having to talk to the doctors to try and figure out exactly what's going on. And to date, they're still not exactly too sure. So it's an ongoing issue that I'm just trying to have to work around at the moment. And the other issue was the flooding that we had in our area. For a few weeks, for about 2-3 weeks, the only roads in and out of our town were reserved for essential travel only because of the flooding and the mudslides, meaning people couldn't go to work. The only people that could really use the roads were for doctors, for first responders. Even the teachers that worked out of district but lived in here, they got on a school bus and they rode the school bus to school to try and lessen the traffic on the roads, just to make sure they were stable and just to make sure they wouldn't give away any more than they would actually have. So as you can see behind me, I've got some beds already built. These are all the beds that we're going to have here. So let's go take a look at them. So as you can see, we've got 4 garden beds here. And they're all 4 feet by 12 feet long. Honestly, typically I wouldn't make them all in one piece like this for our clients or for anyone else like that. However, I did it like this for a few reasons. I wanted to use up all the scrap lumber we had in the shop. So I brick laid the beds. You can take a look here, right here where the seam is. And then you can see on the other side of the bed, where I've put a 1x4 here to brace it like that. And the other pieces that I would use up would have holes and knots in them. Holes and knots, loose knots that would pop out. So what I did is I just basically put a patch inside the garden bed like this. And then once it's filled with soil, you won't be able to see it. You'll just be able to see like this little hole from the outside. And for our own garden beds, it really doesn't matter. This is stuff that we're going to be using in our own yard. Would we make it for a client? Absolutely. Like this? Absolutely not. Just because this isn't the type of standard we want people to have in their own gardens. So let's talk about the size a little bit first. So they're 4 feet wide. The reason they're 4 feet wide is so I can go to each side of the garden bed just like this, and I can reach across pretty much to the middle from both sides of it. If it's any wider than 4 feet, I found most people cannot typically reach to the middle of the garden bed unless they're like a 7-foot tall giant with a 4-foot reach. But that's not very often that we have that. So the maximum size that I like to make them is 4 feet wide for dual side access. If I was just accessing them for one side, I wouldn't want to make them any more than 2 to 2.5 feet wide. So the length is 12 feet. I was initially thinking about doing 8-foot beds. However, when I looked at the space that I had, I realized that an 8-foot bed would go right about to where that brace is, and then I would need to make more beds behind it. And as you can see behind it, we've got our fruit trees planted there. We've got a couple figs, an apple, and a plum. So I kind of scratched my head and said, okay, well, how can I maximize the space that I have for the garden beds while making them as big as I can? So I came up with 12 feet. And I may move them back a little bit or I may move them forward. They're not exactly totally set in place right now. But I still have to level them all out and I have to install and fill them. So you can see our greenhouse over here. You can see it's kind of in shambles right now. We transported it on the back of our trailer on the highway. So you can see the plastic's kind of torn off. Not torn off, but kind of loosened quite a bit. And let's take a look at the back. The bottom of the plastic's quite dirty, but that's going to happen anyways over time. You can see the plastic's not tight at all. This is kind of approximately where the greenhouse will be. I'm not going to move it too much because I want 2 feet of access, at least 2 feet of access on this side between the roses and the greenhouse here. I am planning to recover the greenhouse with proper greenhouse plastic because I found this opaque kind of white plastic just doesn't let enough light inside for me. I noticed that last year with our tomatoes and with our eggplant and peppers that we had in here, that the coloring on the fruits in the greenhouse was actually a lot lighter compared to the fruits outside that were exposed to direct light. So you can see that all our garden beds stretch pretty much right in the middle of our yard here. And I'll address that in just a moment because I want to show you what it's going to look like from far away. So between each garden bed here and the greenhouse, there's going to be roughly 2 feet. Typically, I honestly would like to leave more. However, we've done that for multiple reasons. One, so I can put another garden bed in here, so I can kind of squeeze them in tighter. And the other reason is for sun exposure. I'm wanting to maximize the amount of sun that maximize the space that we get the sun in. When I was looking in the summer, when we moved here, I would go out to the deck every single day at different times and watch where the sun would drop and watch which areas of the yard got the most sun. So we talked a little bit about the greenhouse before, and I have raised beds for inside the greenhouse also. Let's take a look. So I want to maximize the space inside the greenhouse as much as possible. And the way to do that is with a U-shaped garden bed. And you can see that it's basically in 4 pieces right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. I built it like this for a variety of reasons. It's way easier to transport in 4 pieces. It's just going to require for me to assemble it inside the greenhouse, and to build it on. And for 2, I built everything in my workshop. I pre-assemble them and bring them to the site afterwards. And trying to build something like this on site is just a hassle. We actually never build on site because of the amount of time it takes to pack up tools, the time to set up on sites, to the time it takes to set up the tools and everything like that. And then you get back to the workshop and then you have to unload everything. And plus, if it's raining out like it is now, if you guys can see, then I have to bring a 10 by 10 tent and then all the tools get dirty. I've actually found that it's much faster and more efficient for me to build, pre-assemble everything at my workshop, even if it's in pieces like this, and then just bring the tools that I need to the site to reassemble it. And again, these garden beds were made out of our scrap lumber. You can see that I have a seam there, a seam there, there, and you can see that I'll have seams in the back. I'll show you guys that in a second. And you can see there's a seam on the bottom there and a seam in the middle there. And this is a 4th piece that just comes off like that. And you can see that it's not assembled. You can see it's just loose laying, just so you guys get an idea what it's going to look like. I've built one of these before at our old place, and it worked quite well. However, I made the mistake then of making exactly the same size of our greenhouse. As you can see there, our greenhouse is 6 by 8. So I made it exactly the same size, and then I put trellises all on the front 2 feet there. I ran it back down there, I ran it back down here, and I ran it up this side. Basically, it was wrapped around with trellises, and then I had shelves on top of the trellises that I could put my seedlings on. And I found once I put the trellises on, each trellis was on a 1 by 3 piece of yellow cedar, so it stuck out an additional 2 inches on all sides. So when I built this one, I've actually made it 2 inches smaller all the way around. So when I stick my trellises on there, I can then then I'm not stretching out my greenhouse, and it actually fits there properly. So the plan will be, once I actually get the greenhouse all fixed up, tightened up, and the plastic put back on, I'll put those garden beds inside. I'll assemble them. I'll actually tighten up the green. So the process is actually like this. I'll put the greenhouse in the space that I want. I'll mark it out. I'll put the garden beds in there. I'll mark out the garden beds kind of on the ground, and then I'll take off the greenhouse away from that spot. And then I'll level out the garden beds, I'll attach them, I'll pull them all together, and I'll put my trellises all the way around the garden beds. And then I'll actually lift my greenhouse above the trellises over the garden beds and kind of put it right on top of everything. That is by far the easiest way of doing it. With the plastic still on the greenhouse, because honestly, as much as I would like to recover the greenhouse this year, I'm not entirely too sure it's going to happen. So that's probably the way we're going to do it, just because it's logistically the easiest, as opposed to fighting with the greenhouse plastic during the process. So even though our garden beds are kind of in the rough areas that they are right now, you can see that one is right under a Douglas fir. Well, not one, but quite a few of them. And another one is kind of under our apple tree over here, and a cedar that we have over there. The reason they're in kind of the middle of our yard, like I said earlier, is because the sun first hits the pond right there, then it goes to the greenhouse, and it goes back that way, and then it comes and slowly ponders this way. And by the time it gets to about this third garden bed right here, this whole area is just full of sun. So that back garden bed, that's kind of more under the cedar over there. That's going to be basically our shady garden bed. That's what we're going to be using for green leafy veggies and things like that. So one of the common questions that I get when people come to our yard is, oh, these trees are going to block your sun. Well, actually, no, because when in the summer, when I was watching, our sun actually comes from above the house over there, and it hits the pond first. It comes from that way. So I've been carefully mapping it out, as I said earlier, and this is actually the sunniest spot in the whole yard. And now you can understand how patient and loving my family is to basically let me take over basically the prime real estate of our yard. We do have quite a good sized yard that we will be maximizing and putting other things in other areas. However, there is always a little bit of give and take between everyone. So even though, like you can see, the garden beds aren't fully laid out right now, they're just kind of placed roughly where I want them. I am going to have to go back and level them all out, because as you can see, below here, there's a gap underneath the garden bed. There's actually a big one over on this side. If I'll show you. There's actually quite big of a gap underneath there. You can see how that rests up there, and that runs all the way and it rests down there. So I will show you how to install a garden bed properly on another video. And I'll show you how to level it out, and I'll explain the reasons why in more detail there. However, I will go briefly into it now. That gap, if we just leave the garden beds the way they are, and we just fill them with soil, there's quite a bit of a gap underneath there. So eventually, the soil will pour out. You don't want that. They don't need to be perfectly level, but they do need to be better than what they are now. And I will go into the detail about the exact reasons, more reasons why I want to level them out also. So that's pretty much it for the garden beds update. There will be a couple other things I will be tweaking along the way of this project, of course. So that's pretty much it for this part of the update of the project. If you have any questions or any comments about this part of the project, especially the raised beds or anything else that I mentioned in this video, feel free to throw them in the section below, and we will address them. And don't forget, we will be doing more how-to videos and more educational videos in the future. So don't forget to subscribe to our channels and give us a thumbs up.